The most dangerous thing Max Verstappen said in Barcelona wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, and most people completely missed it. Because while the headlines focused on lap times and bodywork, Verstappen quietly revealed that Red Bull's biggest problem for 2026 isn't power, isn't speed, and isn't even reliability. It's something far more uncomfortable. And if he's right, the entire grid should be paying attention right now. Here's why this matters. Formula One is standing at the edge of the biggest technical reset in modern history. New power units, new aerodynamic philosophies, new energy deployment rules. And in moments like this, dominance doesn't come from who looks fastest in testing. It comes from who understands the problem first. Verstappen just hinted that Red Bull might not yet understand theirs. And the reason why changes everything. Because when Max Verstappen says there's still quite a bit of work to do, that isn't a complaint. It's a warning. Most fans heard that phrase and moved on. Engineers didn't, team principals didn't, and rival drivers definitely didn't. Because in Formula One language, that sentence doesn't mean we're behind. It means the foundation isn't locked yet. And in a regulation reset, foundations are everything. Let that sink in. Red Bull arrived in Barcelona with confidence on the surface. The car ran. The data came in. There were no dramatic failures, no red flags dominating the timing screens. But Verstappen wasn't talking like a driver who had just met his car and felt at home. He wasn't talking like someone who'd found the operating window. He was talking like someone still searching for it. And that's the part no one expected. Because Red Bull has built an empire on clarity. On cars that work immediately. On designs that don't need months of interpretation. In previous regulation changes, Red Bull didn't look fast first. They looked comfortable first. And that's how championships were won before rivals even realized what had happened. This time, something feels different. Verstappen acknowledged that the running so far is about understanding, not exploiting. About mapping behavior, not refining performance. And in isolation, that sounds normal. But here's what nobody is talking about. Other teams are saying that too. Red Bull usually isn't. Be honest. When was the last time Red Bull publicly framed early testing as a learning phase rather than confirmation? Exactly. And this is where the story starts to twist. Because the 2026 car isn't just new, it's alien. The balance between electrical deployment and combustion power has shifted dramatically. Energy management now dictates lap time more than raw horsepower. Cooling requirements are different. Aerodynamic trade-offs have multiplied, and the car's behavior changes not corner to corner, but phase to phase within a single lap. That means a driver's feedback matters more than ever. And Verstappen is deeply involved. Not just driving, but shaping the direction of development. Red Bull has openly admitted that his input is central to how risks are evaluated and how concepts are validated. That's powerful, but it's also dangerous. Because when a car is being developed around a driver's sensitivity, precision and feel, it can create blind spots. And that might be the problem Verstappen is hinting at without saying outright. The ARB-era cars worked because they had a narrow operating window that Max could live in better than anyone else. But the 2026 regulations punish narrow windows. They demand adaptability. They demand flexibility. They demand cars that behave predictably across multiple energy states, not just one perfect lap. So ask yourself this. What if Red Bull's problem isn't that the car is slow, but that it's too specific? What if the issue isn't raw performance, but variability? That's when things get uncomfortable. Because Verstappen talked about consistency, about understanding how the car behaves across conditions, about how much still needs to be refined before conclusions can be drawn. Those aren't the words of a driver sitting on a locked-in platform. Those are the words of someone probing limits that haven't settled yet. And here's the irony, Red Bull's rivals might actually be ahead because they're slower. Ferrari and Mercedes have openly described conservative approaches. Wide operating windows, safer cooling, larger margins. Less aggression early on. It doesn't look sexy on timing sheets. But in a new era, that restraint can be an advantage. Read that again. Because when regulations change this much, the team that rushes to optimize before understanding often has to undo months of work later. And Verstappen's comments suggest Red Bull is still choosing its direction. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Verstappen didn't sound worried. He sounded analytical. And that's arguably worse for the rest of the grid. Because when Max Verstappen isn't panicking, it usually means Red Bull believes the problem is solvable. But solvable problems still cost time. And time is the one thing you don't get back in Formula One. Think about it. Development tokens are limited, wind tunnel hours are capped, simulation correlation is fragile. And once a concept path is chosen, reversing it isn't just expensive, it's politically painful inside a team. So the question becomes unavoidable. Has Red Bull delayed committing to a concept because something didn't add up? Or have they committed and now realized it comes with consequences? That's insane. And it brings us to the quiet pressure building behind the scenes. Because Red Bull is no longer just racing Ferrari and Mercedes, they're racing Aston Martin with Adrian Newey's fingerprints all over the future. They're racing a grid that learned from Red Bull's dominance and designed systems to catch them specifically. And for the first time in years, Red Bull doesn't sound like the team dictating the narrative. They're reacting. Midway through this story, it's worth saying something obvious. If you enjoy this level of analysis, you're not a casual fan. You're already ahead of most of the internet. Smart fans, subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious what you think, so answer this honestly in the comments. Is Red Bull hiding a deeper issue, or are they about to flip the switch when everyone else runs out of room? Because there's another layer to Verstappen's comments that hasn't been discussed nearly enough. He emphasized how different the car feels relative to previous generations, how energy deployment changes corner behavior, how the car evolves through a lap. That tells us something crucial. The ARB style of building a car that rotates aggressively and rewards precision might not map cleanly onto the new rules. And if that's true, Red Bull's greatest strength could become a constraint. Remember, the best cars aren't always the fastest in theory. They're the ones that drivers can repeat lap after lap without fighting them. Verstappen thrives when the car talks back clearly, when feedback is sharp, when limits are defined. What if the 2026 platform blurs those limits? What if the car behaves differently depending on energy state in ways that can't be fully trained around? Suddenly, the problem isn't development pace, it's philosophy. And that's the kind of problem that doesn't show up in testing headlines. It shows up in races you lose by 0.3 when everything looked fine on Friday. Let's be clear. This is not about Red Bull collapsing. This is about Red Bull facing something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. And uncertainty is where power shifts begin. Because while Red Bull is still analysing, others are locking in decisions, others are choosing compromises and building around them. Others are accepting limitations in exchange for stability. And in a sport where iteration speed decides championships, stability matters. Here's the part that should make you uneasy if you're a Red Bull fan. Verstappen's tone wasn't defensive. It wasn't dismissive. It was honest. And honesty at this stage means the team is still searching for answers, not celebrating solutions. That doesn't mean they won't find them. But it does mean the margin for error is thinner than it's been in years. So what happens next? If Red Bull solves this early, they could emerge with a car that adapts better than anything else on the grid. A machine that Max Verstappen can weaponize while others struggle to understand theirs. In that scenario, these comments become the calm before the storm. But if they don't, if this problem forces compromises later, if updates become corrective instead of additive, then this is the first crack in the armor that defined an era. Be honest, is this the start of another Verstappen-led dominance? Or the first sign that the field is finally compressing? Because one thing is certain, the biggest threat to Red Bull in 2026 might not be another team. It might be the rules themselves. And Max Verstappen just told us that, without ever saying it out loud. If you want to keep following how this unfolds, there's another video on the channel breaking down how rival teams are interpreting the same regulations in completely different ways. Watch that next, because this story isn't finished. It's just starting.